Jungkook mentioned Jimin's name in a dream in the dormitory. Jimin heard him and chose to be silent, even though his heart was broken. Crescent moon. The dormitory was silent, but for the soft, irregular rhythm of Jungkook's breathing. Moonlight spilled through the blinds, casting fragmented stripes across the floor, painting the room in fractured silver and shadow. The sudden sharpness of his voice broke the quiet. Jimin. It wasn't a whisper, not entirely, not in the conscious sense, but something raw, unguarded, and uncontainable escaped him. Jimin, lying on the opposite side of the room, froze mid-breath, his heart seizing at the sound. The syllable carried a weight he couldn't place: longing, guilt, fear, desire. He felt the air tighten, the walls shrink, and yet he remained motionless, as though moving would shatter the fragile bubble of the moment. He should have spoken, should have comforted him or pulled him into an embrace that he had been craving silently for weeks. But every instinct screamed to remain hidden, silent, protective of the fragile illusion that Jungkook was at peace in his sleep. His own heart, however, twisted sharply, each beat a knife reminding him of the unspoken truths between them, the confessions they never dared to voice. Jungkook stirred, shifting slightly, murmuring again, "I can't lose you, Jimin." His eyes fluttered beneath closed lids, a storm brewing beneath the calm of sleep. The words were raw, unpolished, desperate, yet they carried a clarity that cut deeper than any conversation in daylight ever could. Jimin's chest tightened. The room smelled faintly of sweat and detergent, the scent oddly grounding amidst the whirlwind of emotions. He traced the faint outlines of Jungkook's fingers resting loosely on the blanket, noting the subtle tension even in rest. It was almost cruel, this intimate revelation that existed only in the liminal space between sleep and consciousness, between courage and fear. Minutes passed like hours. Jimin wanted to speak, to reach across the void, but his hands stayed firmly beneath the covers. He remembered the times Jungkook had smiled at him, the moments when he had thought he could read his expressions like an open book, only to realize that Jungkook's walls were far stronger than his own fragile heart could penetrate. "I'm sorry," Jungkook whispered again, this time muffled into the pillow. The voice was so soft it could have been imagined, but Jimin knew better. It was a confession not yet meant for the waking world, yet it shattered him completely. Silence returned, punctuated only by the soft hiss of the air conditioner. Jimin's thoughts raced, colliding with his own memories, his own regrets. Every laugh shared, every brush of hands, every look held longer than necessary, it all replayed with brutal clarity. He had loved him silently, agonized over boundaries, over timing, over pride. And now, Jungkook's dream had peeled back the layers, leaving them both exposed in the most vulnerable way. He stayed still, choosing silence not out of indifference but out of devotion, an unspoken promise that he would be there without demanding words, without forcing acknowledgement. His own heart ached, but it was a quiet ache, patient and enduring. Watching Jungkook sleep, listening to his unconscious confessions, Jimin realized that this was intimacy in its rawest form. Proximity without permission, presence without interaction, love without declaration. And as the first pale rays of dawn began to seep into the room, illuminating every corner with tentative light, Jimin finally allowed himself a single, silent tear. It traced the curve of his cheek, disappearing into the pillow beneath his chin, a secret witness to the confessions spoken in dreams. Jungkook murmured again, "Don't ever leave me," and Jimin's heart, though broken, swelled with an unspoken understanding. He would stay, quietly, without acknowledgement, without reward, until the world permitted them more than fleeting shadows. The dormitory remained still, but the space between them had shifted irreversibly. Silence had never felt heavier, sweeter, more intimate. The morning came, inevitable and bright, yet neither of them spoke of the night. The words existed in the air, in their minds, in their hearts, and that was enough for now. The first light of dawn barely touched the edges of the dormitory, but Jimin was already awake, his eyes tracing the faint patterns of the blinds. His body was rigid with memories of the night, the words Jungkook had whispered lingering like smoke in the room. He could still hear the tremor in Jungkook's voice, the way it had cracked on his name, carrying unspoken confessions that made Jimin's heart throb painfully. Jungkook stirred beside him, stretching, and the motion drew a soft gasp from Jimin, though he quickly muffled it into the pillow. "Morning," Jungkook said, his voice rough from sleep. The words should have been casual, ordinary, but the intensity in his gaze made it anything but. There was something unspoken there, a weight neither of them dared articulate in the harsh light of day. Jimin turned his face away, pretending to tie his shoelaces, though his hands shook slightly. "Morning," he replied, voice low, careful. It was the same morning greeting they always exchanged, but now it carried the tension of a battlefield, every syllable loaded with dangerous undertones. "You looked different when you woke up," Jungkook murmured, his tone teasing, but there was an edge that made Jimin freeze. His words weren't innocent, not completely. They were probing, almost daring him to reveal too much. "I'm fine," Jimin said quickly, forcing a small smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Just tired." Jungkook didn't respond immediately. He tilted his head, observing him as if trying to read a secret he wasn't meant to know. The way his fingers flexed against the bedsheet, the faint flush in his cheeks, everything screamed honesty, vulnerability, and Jimin's heart twisted painfully at how visible he felt under Jungkook's gaze. "You're lying," Jungkook finally said, voice low, more intimate than accusatory. "I can hear it, even when you try to hide it." Jimin froze completely, his throat suddenly dry. "I'm not," he whispered, though the protest sounded hollow even to him. Jungkook leaned closer, and Jimin could feel the warmth radiating off him, a dangerous proximity that made the air between them electric. "Then why didn't you say anything last night, when I said your name?" The words were deliberate, soft, carrying the kind of intensity that made every nerve in Jimin's body ache. Jimin swallowed, his mind racing. Part of him wanted to confess, to reach across the space between them and bridge the years of restraint and silent longing. But another part, the part that had learned to protect his own heart, kept him silent. He kept his gaze down, pretending to tie his shoelaces with precise care. But his fingers trembled. I didn't want to wake you," he murmured finally. Jungkook's eyes narrowed, a frown tugging at the corners of his lips. "Jimin, you always think about me too much. You know that, right?" His voice carried warmth, but beneath it lurked a question heavier than any accusation. "I can't help it," Jimin admitted quietly, barely above a whisper, feeling a dangerous flush creep over his skin. "You mean too much." The words hung between them like a fragile glass sculpture, threatening to shatter under the weight of their shared history. Jungkook's chest rose slightly faster, and he exhaled in a slow, deliberate way. "You know," he said, voice low and intimate, "I dreamt about you last night too, but I didn't think you'd hear it." Jimin's stomach dropped. His pulse was hammering so loudly he was certain Jungkook could hear it. What did you dream?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Jungkook smirked faintly, almost mischievously, but there was a hunger in his gaze that made Jimin's knees weak. You were running away from me, and I kept calling your name, trying to catch you before you disappeared." His words were deliberate, almost torturous, pulling Jimin closer to the edge of something he wasn't sure he was ready to confront. I never run away," Jimin said quickly, though his words lacked conviction. He couldn't meet Jungkook's eyes, not when they were filled with that mix of longing and raw honesty. Jungkook leaned even closer until their shoulders brushed. "Do you really believe that?" His voice was low, velvet, and dangerous, brushing over Jimin's ear like fire. "Or are you just too afraid to admit that sometimes you do?" Jimin's breath hitched. The tension between them was unbearable, a charged wire that could snap with a single misstep. He wanted to close the distance, to reach out, to let the flood of unspoken feelings finally escape. And yet, he stayed silent, his heart breaking quietly, witnessing the very thing he'd craved most, Jungkook's vulnerability, while remaining invisible in his eyes. Jungkook's lips curved into a knowing smile, one that seemed to read Jimin's thoughts before he could even speak them. "You're hiding something," he said softly, almost teasingly, but there was an edge of desperation there that made Jimin shiver. "I can feel it in the way you look at me." "I'm not hiding anything," Jimin said again, the words weaker than before. He hated how honest he sounded despite himself. His chest tightened, every beat a reminder of the unspoken truths between them. Jungkook's gaze didn't waver. He reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from Jimin's forehead, his fingers lingering far longer than necessary. "Then why do you feel like this?" His whisper was intoxicating, an arrow aimed straight at Jimin's heart. Jimin closed his eyes, letting a single tear escape despite his efforts. He wanted to speak, to confess, to throw away the restraint that had protected him for so long. But he didn't. Instead, he swallowed the pain, the longing, the ache that filled his chest, and simply nodded, silent. Jungkook studied him for a long moment, then leaned back slightly, as if respecting the fragile barrier Jimin had constructed, though neither of them was fully at peace. The dormitory was quiet again, but the air between them burned with unsaid words, with the intensity of longing that refused to be dismissed. Even as the morning sunlight streamed fully into the room, illuminating every detail, the subtle tremor in Jimin's hands, the flush in his cheeks, the unguarded vulnerability in Jungkook's eyes, the silence remained, weighted, electric, intimate. It was a silence that spoke more than words ever could, a promise of emotions too dangerous to voice yet too powerful to ignore. And as the world outside continued its ordinary rhythm, Jimin realized that nothing would ever feel ordinary between them again. Every glance, every touch, every whisper in the dormitory would carry the memory of this morning, the memory of a dream, the memory of a heart breaking in quiet devotion. The studio lights were harsh, unforgiving, but Jungkook didn't notice them. He was staring at the empty chair across from him, the one Jimin had occupied just a few minutes ago, replaying the image in his mind. The air still smelled faintly of Jimin's shampoo, a subtle, haunting reminder of his presence, and every fiber of Jungkook's body ached with the memory of that brush of skin when Jimin had passed him on the way to the restroom. Jimin had left abruptly, muttering something about needing water, but Jungkook could feel the tension behind the casual excuse. He hadn't moved, hadn't stopped staring. His pulse was erratic, a storm of unspoken words, of confessions withheld. "Why are you running from me?" he muttered under his breath, loud enough that the engineer in the control booth shot him a curious glance. Hours earlier, the tension had been almost unbearable. Jimin had been unusually quiet during rehearsal, his usual warmth replaced by a guarded, almost icy detachment. Jungkook had caught every glance, every subtle hesitation, and every time their hands brushed while adjusting microphones, a current had shot straight through him. It was maddening, intoxicating, and terrifying all at once. Finally, Jungkook couldn't hold back. He followed Jimin to the practice room, the narrow corridor stretching longer than it physically should. "Jimin!" His voice cracked slightly, betraying his desperation. Jimin froze mid-step, the bottle of water in his hand trembling slightly. "Go away," Jimin said softly, but there was no heat in it, only conflict, confusion, and fear. "Go away," Jungkook repeated, taking a step closer, ignoring the icy distance Jimin tried to maintain. "Do you even realize what you're doing to me? Do you have any idea how it feels to hear you in my dreams and then watch you act like you don't care?" His voice rose slightly, the restraint breaking. Jimin looked away, biting his lower lip to keep himself from responding. His pulse was racing, and he knew Jungkook could feel it, could see it, could read the desperation and longing that he fought so hard to hide. "You're impossible," Jimin finally whispered, the words almost cruel in their softness. "But maybe I don't want you to stop." Jungkook froze, his eyes widening in disbelief. "What did you just say?" His voice was rough, husky, filled with an emotion he couldn't quite define. "I said, maybe I don't want you to stop." Jimin's voice trembled, betraying the courage it took to say those words. "Even if it hurts, even if it breaks me a little, I can't stay away from you." The air between them ignited instantly, a spark that had been smoldering for weeks now bursting into flame. Jungkook closed the distance, his hand brushing against Jimin's cheek, fingertips tracing the curve of his jaw. The touch was electrifying, intimate, and terrifying all at once. "You have no idea how long I've waited to hear that," he breathed, leaning closer. "Do you know how much I've wanted to tell you everything, to let you in, but I was scared you. Run." Jimin's eyes glistened, the conflict within him raw and visible. "I'm scared too," he admitted softly, his chest rising and falling rapidly. "Scared that if I let myself fall, I'll get hurt. scared that you'll leave me like everyone else eventually. Jungkook's hand dropped to rest over Jimin's heart, feeling the frantic rhythm beneath his palm. I won't, he promised, voice low, intense, a whisper of fire and devotion. I can't leave you, not now, not ever. You're mine, and I'm yours. Jimin's breath hitched, the weight of the confession hitting him like a tidal wave. He wanted to push away, to deny it, to protect his fragile heart, but his body refused. Instead, he leaned into the touch, letting the warmth of Jungkook's hand seep into him, grounding him, melting the walls he'd built around his emotions. You don't know how much it hurts to see you this close, to hear your voice and yet feel invisible, he admitted, his voice trembling, raw with vulnerability. You're never invisible to me, Jungkook said firmly, his thumb brushing over Jimin's cheekbone. Even when you think you are, even when you hide, even when you deny yourself. I see you. I've always seen you. For a moment, the world narrowed to the space between them. The brush of skin, the racing heartbeat, the unsaid words hanging thick like a storm cloud. And then, Jimin, trembling with the weight of his own longing, reached up, capturing Jungkook's lips in a kiss that was both desperate and deliberate. The air between them seemed to ignite, every second stretching, burning, consuming. Jungkook responded instantly, hands tangling in Jimin's hair, pulling him closer until their bodies pressed together. It was a collision of years of restraint, of silent longing, of nights spent dreaming of moments just like this. Every touch, every shiver, every broken whisper of their names filled the room with an intimacy that neither of them could deny. They pulled apart slightly, foreheads resting together, breaths mingling, hearts hammering in unison. You have no idea how much I've needed this, Jungkook whispered, voice rough, tinged with something deeper than desire. I think I might finally know, Jimin murmured, voice trembling, tears brimming but unspilled. He buried his face into Jungkook's neck, the warmth, the closeness, the undeniable reality of them together shattering the last remnants of fear. And in that small, dimly lit practice room, with the world waiting just beyond the door, two hearts collided, fragile and fierce, bruised but burning. The silence afterward was deafening, filled with promises neither dared voice fully, but enough for them to know nothing would ever be the same again. The night had fallen hard over the city, lights from the streets spilling through the dormitory windows, painting the room in fractured gold and shadow. Jimin sat cross-legged on his bed, staring at the floor as his mind replayed every moment of the day. Every glance, every touch from Jungkook lingered like fire, refusing to fade. His chest was heavy, filled with desire, fear, and an ache that made him feel impossibly fragile. A soft knock on the door made him flinch. Jimin, can we talk? Jungkook's voice, low and urgent, carried through the thin walls, filling the room with tension. Jimin's heart skipped. He didn't know if he was ready, yet some part of him ached to hear him, to confront the raw, dangerous pull that had been building between them for weeks. He opened the door cautiously. Jungkook was leaning against the frame, his hair tousled, sleeves rolled up, eyes dark with intensity. What now? Jimin asked, trying to sound calm, though his voice betrayed the storm inside him. I can't stop thinking about today, Jungkook admitted, stepping closer, every inch of him radiating a dangerous magnetism. Every time you touch me, every time you look at me, it's like fire in my chest I can't control. Jimin swallowed hard. And you think I can control it? His voice was almost a whisper, but the tremor betrayed him. Jungkook's hand brushed against his cheek, lingering too long, igniting a shiver that ran through Jimin's entire body. No, he said softly, dangerously. I don't want you to. I want to burn with you, Jimin. I want to feel every heartbeat, every thought, every hesitation. I want it all. Jimin's pulse raced, and the weight of desire mixed with fear pressed down on him. You don't understand, he said quietly. If we let this go too far, it could ruin everything. What if someone finds out? What if? His voice broke, unable to complete the sentence. Jungkook's lips curved into a teasing, almost predatory smile. Then we'll deal with it, he whispered, moving closer until their bodies were almost touching. But you can't deny this, can you? You feel it too. Jimin looked away, heart hammering. I do, he admitted softly, his voice barely audible. But I'm scared. Scared of losing control, scared of losing you, scared of everything that comes after. Jungkook cupped his face, forcing Jimin to meet his gaze. Jimin, look at me. You're not alone in this. I feel it too. I've wanted you for weeks, months, longer than I can admit. And I'll take the risk with you, no matter what it costs. The intensity of his words broke something inside Jimin. He wanted to resist, to hold back, but the raw honesty, the fire in Jungkook's eyes, and the ache in his own chest were too much. Then, what do we do? He whispered, almost pleading. Jungkook smiled, dangerously close now. We stop pretending. We stop hiding. Tonight, it's just us. His hands slid down to Jimin's waist, pulling him closer until the heat of their bodies pressed together. Jimin's breath hitched, every nerve alive, every thought of caution melting away. They moved together in a storm of emotion and desire, each kiss, each touch carrying the weight of weeks of longing and frustration. Jimin's hands trembled as they traced the lines of Jungkook's body, memorizing every contour, every tremor of response. Jungkook's lips sought his relentlessly, demanding, tender, leaving no space for hesitation. Hours seemed to collapse into a single, intense moment of fire and vulnerability. Every whispered name, every shiver, every heartbeat connected them, unspoken promises layering over confessions too dangerous to voice aloud. They were raw, exposed, a tangle of desire and fear. But in that space, nothing else existed. No doubts, no outside pressures, only the undeniable pull between them. Eventually, they collapsed into each other, breathing hard, hearts pounding in perfect sync. Jungkook's fingers traced lazy patterns on Jimin's back, and Jimin buried his face in Jungkook's shoulder, the heat between them still lingering like a slow-burning flame. I'm scared, Jimin admitted again, voice muffled but honest. I know, Jungkook said softly, pressing a gentle kiss to the top of Jimin's head. But being scared doesn't mean we stop. It just means it matters. And this, it matters more than anything. They stayed like that for hours, silent except for the sound of their breathing, the occasional whispered name, the weight of their unspoken confessions pressing against the night. Outside, the city continued its endless rhythm, oblivious to the storm that had erupted in a small dormitory room. But inside, everything had shifted. Nothing would ever be the same. Even when sleep finally claimed them, tangled together on the bed, every nerve alive with memory and sensation, Jimin knew that the line between desire and danger had blurred irreversibly. Every glance, every brush of skin, every whisper would carry the fire of this night forward, shaping everything that came after, whether they were ready or not. The dormitory was unusually quiet that evening, the only sound coming from the distant hum of traffic outside. Jimin sat at his desk, staring blankly at the screen in front of him, though the document he was supposedly working on was empty. His mind was still tangled in the aftermath of last night, the heat of Jungkook's touch, the intensity of his gaze, and the whispered promises that had left his heart simultaneously full and raw. A sudden knock at the door startled him. Jimin, are you in there? Jungkook's voice floated through the wood, calm but carrying an undercurrent of something Jimin couldn't quite place, urgency, longing, maybe frustration. Jimin's stomach twisted. He wanted to hide, to pretend he wasn't alone, but a part of him, a reckless, desperate part, wanted Jungkook to come in anyway. Yeah, I'm here, he called softly, forcing his voice to remain steady. The door opened almost immediately, and Jungkook stepped in, closing it behind him with a deliberate click. His eyes swept over Jimin, taking in the slight tremble in his hands, the subtle flush on his cheeks. You've been avoiding me, he said, stepping closer, his tone teasing but edged with something sharper, something that made Jimin's chest tighten. I haven't, Jimin muttered, though his words sounded hollow even to him. He turned back to his desk, hopping to find refuge in routine, but Jungkook's presence was too overpowering. Jungkook's hand brushed against Jimin's shoulder, lightly at first, but the pressure lingered, grounding him in a way that was almost dangerous. Don't lie to me, Jimin. I can feel it. You've been thinking about last night nonstop, haven't you? His voice dropped lower, intimate, almost a whisper that sent shivers down Jimin's spine. Jimin's throat went dry. Maybe a little, he admitted, unable to meet Jungkook's eyes. The admission felt like a surrender, and his heart pounded in a mixture of fear and longing. Jungkook smiled, dangerously close now. "A little," he teased, but there was fire behind the words. "You're always thinking about me, even when you act like you're not." Jimin's hands tightened into fists on the desk. "I can't help it," he murmured, voice trembling. "You make it impossible not to." Jungkook moved closer, reducing the space between them until every breath, every heartbeat, every unspoken desire was palpable. "Impossible, huh?" he said softly, lips barely brushing Jimin's ear. "Maybe that's the point. Maybe I want it to be impossible." The words ignited something deep within Jimin. He turned in his chair, finally meeting Jungkook's gaze, a mix of defiance and longing battling for control. "And if it ruins everything?" he asked, voice low, desperate. "If we can't stop?" Jungkook's hand cupped Jimin's cheek, thumb brushing over the tense line of his jaw. "Then we'll face it together," he said, voice steady, full of conviction. "I don't care about the rules, the timing, the consequences. I care about you. And right now I want you, all of you." Jimin's breath hitched. "You don't know how much that scares me," he admitted, the confession trembling on his lips. "I've never let myself feel like this before, never with anyone." Jungkook's smile softened, a rare vulnerability flickering in his eyes. "Then let it scare you," he whispered, leaning in so close that Jimin could feel the warmth radiating off his body. "Let it scare you because I'm not going anywhere." The tension broke in a storm of desire, raw and unfiltered. Jimin's hands reached for Jungkook instinctively, pulling him closer, their lips meeting in a kiss that was both desperate and deliberate. It was the collision of weeks of restraint, of silent longing, of nights spent dreaming of this very moment. Every inch of contact, every shiver, every whispered name intensified the storm between them. Hours passed in a blur of whispered confessions, trembling touches, and heated glances. Jungkook's hands traced patterns along Jimin's spine, and Jimin memorized every curve, every tremor of response, committing it to memory as if it were the only thing keeping him grounded. The room itself seemed to shrink around them, time condensing into a single, searing moment where nothing else mattered except the undeniable pull between their bodies and hearts. When they finally pulled back, foreheads resting together, breaths mingling, the world outside felt impossibly distant. "You have no idea how much I've wanted this," Jungkook murmured, voice rough, tinged with something deeper than desire. "I think I'm finally realizing," Jimin admitted, voice trembling, eyes glistening with the unspilled weight of his emotions, "that I can't run from it anymore. From you, from us." Jungkook smiled, fingers brushing a stray lock of hair from Jimin's forehead. "Then stay," he said softly, almost pleading. "Stay with me even when it scares you, even when it's messy, even when it's dangerous." And Jimin did. He stayed. He let himself be vulnerable, let the fire and fear and longing consume him, let the intensity of their connection become the only truth he needed to hold on to. Outside, the city moved on, indifferent to the storm that had engulfed a small dormitory room. But inside, nothing would ever be the same. Every touch, every word, every stolen glance carried the promise of what could be, unpredictable, uncontrollable, and utterly consuming. The dormitory felt suffocating that evening, the air thick with unspoken words and lingering touches from earlier in the day. Jimin leaned against the window, watching the city lights shimmer on wet streets below, his reflection fractured across the glass. He could still feel Jungkook's warmth against him, the lingering weight of fingers that had traced his skin with careful obsession. His chest was tight, heart racing with a mixture of fear and desire, and he knew he couldn't breathe properly until he confronted the emotions clawing at him from every direction. The sudden sound of Jungkook's voice behind him made him jump. "You're avoiding me again," Jungkook said, tone low, but edged with that teasing, dangerous urgency that always made Jimin's knees weak. I'm not avoiding you," Jimin murmured, turning slowly, though his gaze faltered under Jungkook's. The dim light highlighted every line of his face, every curve, every subtle tremor that betrayed the storm inside him. "I just need space." "Space," Jungkook echoed, stepping closer, his shadow falling over Jimin, trapping him against the window. Do you know how terrifying it is to feel you slipping away after everything? After last night? After today? His eyes were dark, urgent, a dangerous mix of longing and frustration that left Jimin breathless. Jimin's lips parted, but no words came. His hands tightened against the sill, knuckles white, as if holding onto the window frame could anchor him against the emotional tide crashing through him. "I'm scared," he whispered finally. Voice barely audible. I don't know if I can handle this. Handle us." Jungkook's hand lifted, brushing a stray lock of hair from Jimin's face, lingering on his cheek. "Then let me handle it," he said softly, voice rough and intimate. "Let me carry some of the weight. You don't have to do this alone." The words ignited something raw in Jimin. He could feel the tremor of need, fear, and desire coiling in his chest. "And if it's too much?" he asked, almost trembling as he met Jungkook's gaze. "Then we'll burn together," Jungkook said, a dangerous smile tugging at his lips. "But I'll never let you go." His hand slid to Jimin's waist, pressing him closer, the heat radiating off his body, igniting every nerve in Jimin's skin. They stood there for a moment, suspended in tension, until Jungkook leaned in, capturing Jimin's lips with a kiss that was both desperate and deliberate. The world narrowed to the press of their bodies, the heat of skin against skin, the electricity of every touch. Jimin's hands trembled as they slid over Jungkook's back, memorizing the contours of him, committing every response to memory. Jungkook deepened the kiss, pressing his body closer, hands tangling in Jimin's hair, pulling him against the wall, against the undeniable pull that had been building for weeks. Every whisper of their names, every soft groan, every shiver carried the weight of longing and restraint shattered. "Jimin," Jungkook breathed against his lips, voice rough and urgent, "you have no idea how much I've wanted this, how long I've waited." Jimin's chest heaved, voice breaking as he whispered back, "I've wanted you too, more than I can say, more than I can bear." His hands clutched at Jungkook's shoulders, nails digging into fabric as the need and fear and desire mingled into a heady, consuming storm. They broke apart for a breath, foreheads pressed together, breaths mingling, hearts hammering in unison. "We shouldn't," Jimin whispered, voice trembling. "We should slow down, think." But Jungkook's lips found his again, silencing him, pressing urgency into every touch. "There is no slow," he murmured against Jimin's mouth. "Not with us, not anymore." The intensity continued, escalating, a collision of bodies and hearts, whispers of names and confessions lost to the dark, the world beyond the dormitory fading away. They explored the boundaries of desire and intimacy, each touch and movement carrying the weight of unspoken fears, hopes, and promises. Eventually, they collapsed into each other, limbs entwined, breaths heavy, skin flushed with the aftermath of intensity and vulnerability. Jimin rested his head against Jungkook's chest, hearing the steady rhythm of a heartbeat that matched his own. "I'm scared," he admitted, voice muffled against him. "I know," Jungkook whispered back, fingers tracing lazy patterns on his back. "But fear doesn't matter here. Not tonight, not with us, just stay with me." And Jimin did. He stayed, letting the storm of emotions and desire wash over him, letting the vulnerability, fear, and longing consume him entirely. Outside, the city moved on, indifferent to the passionate, fraught storm that had erupted in a small dormitory room. Inside, nothing was ordinary anymore. Every glance, every touch, every whispered word carried the promise of what they had begun. A dangerous, beautiful, consuming connection that neither could escape, and neither wanted to. The dormitory was quiet, but the air was heavy with anticipation. Jungkook sat on the edge of the bed, his fingers intertwined, mind racing as he watched Jimin across the room. Jimin's eyes were fixed on the floor, but there was a vulnerability in them, a quiet storm that mirrored Jungkook's own. The tension that had been building for weeks, the longing, the fear, the desire, was thick enough to taste. "I need to know," Jungkook said finally, his voice low, rough with emotion. "I need to know if it's real, if you feel it too." Jimin's gaze lifted slowly, locking with Jungkook's. "I feel it," he admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "Every day, every second, even when I try to hide it." Jungkook rose, closing the distance between them, letting the space shrink until it was just the two of them, hearts hammering in unison. "Then stop hiding," he murmured, hands cupping Jimin's face. "Stop pretending that you're okay without me, because I see you. I see every fear, every longing, every piece of you." Jimin's lips trembled as tears filled his eyes. "I've been scared," he confessed. "Scared that if I let myself feel, it'll break me, that I'll lose you somehow." "You won't," Jungkook said firmly, pressing his forehead to Jimin's. "I'll never leave you. I can't. You're everything I've been holding back, everything I've wanted. And I'll fight to keep you if you let me." The words were a balm to Jimin's heart, the truth of them cutting through months of fear and restraint. He reached up, letting his fingers brush against Jungkook's cheek, trembling with the weight of his own confession. "Then I'm yours," he whispered, voice full of emotion. "Completely." Jungkook's lips curved into a soft, almost reverent smile. "Yours," he echoed, voice thick, "and I'm yours always." They fell into each other, a tangle of limbs and hearts, the raw intensity of their connection finally given the freedom it had demanded for so long. Every touch, every kiss, every whispered name carried the weight of their shared longing, their confessions, their fears. For the first time, they could exist without pretense, without hesitation, letting desire and love merge into something fierce, unbreakable, and beautiful. Hours passed unnoticed, the outside world fading away, leaving only the quiet intimacy of two hearts that had found each other despite every obstacle. Jimin rested against Jungkook's chest, listening to the steady rhythm of a heartbeat that matched his own. "I'm not scared anymore," he murmured, voice soft but certain. "I know," Jungkook replied, pressing a gentle kiss to the top of his head. "We don't need to be, not with each other." The night stretched around them, calm and infinite, a canvas for the bond they had finally embraced. Silence settled, but it was a silence full of warmth, full of understanding, full of love. For Jungkook and Jimin, everything else could wait, everything else could fade, because they had each other, finally, completely, and nothing would ever be the same again. And in that quiet dormitory room, under the faint glow of moonlight, hearts entwined and souls laid bare, they realized that love, in all its raw, messy, consuming intensity, was worth every fear, every risk, and every sleepless night. For the first time, they were home, in each other,